Welcome to another edition of MindFit Podcast. My name is Robert Aceves, and I'm here with Neil Babins. How you doing, Neil?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great. Actually, very happy that we are starting in July now. This is, we've made it past half the year, so that's a good thing. Hoping that we have a vaccine soon for this virus that's going around that is now closing things again for us. So hopefully something happens soon. So how was your week?
My week was good, but I had the same concerns you did. We seem to be rolling back again, and I understand the safety concerns, but people are sort of like getting excited about opening things up. And then we had, of course, that announcement in at least in LA County about the closing of the beaches for July 4th weekend, which I understand because there's only going to be a lot of people. But the week itself was good, but again, a lot of concern about the uncertainty over that. And I had a short week. This is actually my Friday today, so that we're taping on, because I'm only working 4 days, and I'm going away on the weekend to Sequoia National Forest to do some camping. So I'm looking forward to that. But
nice. That sounds amazing. So
yeah, it's amazing because when you book a trip to Sequoia or San Diego, it feels like you're going to Europe or something like that. I think I said that last week. But it's just to get out of the city, and it'll be nice though. We have big open space, and the hiking trails are still open, and people are looking around, scrambling around for what they can still do. People are having barbecues at home, for July 4th, and getting together with small groups, and as opposed to having, a lot of people had beach plans and they had to have them canceled, unfortunately. So,
yeah,
but
it's definitely sad if we go back, but at the same time, it's probably needed because of the amount of people that are getting sick nowadays. I actually have, quite a few friends now that are calling me and letting me know that they're testing positive, and there's a couple of clients as well, and so it's getting more and more prominent. And so hopefully people are taking care of themselves and, doing the things that are necessary to stay safe. And anyway, today we're going to be talking about one of the things that I feel is one of the most useful things that anyone can have in their lives. It's a tool that I use every single day with my clients, with my friends, with my family. It's rapport. It's basically how to build rapport. It's a lot of people talk about it, and some people are really good at it, some people are not so good at it. And so today we're going to just expand a little bit on it. Both me and Neil have a lot of experience with this because we got to deal with people on a regular basis. And rapport basically to me is a connection, right? It's connecting with that person, that individual. It could be a group as well. Groups can build rapport between each other. It could be between countries as well. There are countries who have rapport and countries who don't have rapport. And so the more of a connection you have, it's sort of like building this third person in between you two. So it's sort of like I was trying to explain to you earlier, like there's a thing in Buddhism where they talk about you have a Coke and then you have a bottle of Sprite. Then you take the containers of the Coke and the Sprite and you put them together, and then you mix them, and then you put the mixture back into the containers, and the Coke is no longer the Coke and the Sprite is no longer the Sprite. It is now a new, combination of both. And that's sort of what happens when you have rapport with someone. You kind of feel their feelings, their emotions, you empathize with them, you sort of become something different that you weren't before. And so with the other person, the other person also may feel that way after you have that connection and you build that rapport. So what are your thoughts on this, Neil?
Rapport is probably the most important element of what I do, and probably what most of us do, or many of us do. It's been shown, actually, evidence has shown, for example, in the mental health field, that no matter what approach your therapist or life coach takes towards improvement and growth, no matter what school of thought they come from or what camp they come from, 90% of the positive outcome that you'll have with the mental health professional or anybody that you speak to in that level has to do with rapport between you and the therapist. 90% of it is the connection or bond that you've made with one another, as opposed to what actual approach you're taking or what you're actually implementing. So It's probably the most important element in any relationship. And it's multi-layered too. It has more to do than just liking the person or trusting the person. Those are important elements as well. It goes deeper. It's about a bond or a connection that you have with somebody else. You're mutually attentive to each other. There's a positive energy, and you seem to be on the same page. There's a mutual understanding, a common goal. You both get each other. You know what I'm saying? And there's something about that is, unmatchable. And it's not just about liking and getting along. It's really about feeling at ease on all different levels. And trust is a part of that, but it goes beyond just trusting. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of techniques out there. I mean, rapport is also used in sales. People use it all the time because the more you can build that connection with someone or the bond that you're talking about, the more likely that person is to buy your product or to do the things that you want them to do. So it's something used to influence the person. So as a doctor or as a therapist, you want that person to trust you so that they can change their lives or the way of thinking or whatever it is that you're working with. So one of the best examples that I saw, and I think I talked about this before, was a video that I just watched one time on YouTube. I couldn't find it anymore because I didn't even know what the name of it is. I've tried searching for it, I couldn't find it, but it was about this guy at some beach in some faraway country, and he saw this big giant sea lion laying on the beach, and he started to approach it very slowly, getting close to it and laying down. And little by little, he was getting closer and closer, building rapport, just basically mimicking all the movements that the sea lion was doing. And then eventually he was able to lay down next to it. And this was a gigantic one. It was probably the same size as the guy or maybe even bigger. So that thing could have easily jumped on him and, killed him or something. But he just got really close. They were actually cuddling at some point in the video. And it was just beautiful, to watch, to see them getting close to each other. And so that's one of the things that really can help with rapport is proximity. And mimicking is one of the ways that they always talk about rapport. But you have to do it in a way that doesn't seem like you're mimicking the other person or mocking them. It's more about, really feeling them, feeling their movements. And this is just an example of how you can build rapport with no communication. I mean, it is communication, but it is non-verbal communication. And so it is something you can do simply by, doing it. You could do it with kids all the time or babies where you're just copying whatever they're doing, and the kid just suddenly starts to feel more alive and they feel like someone's paying attention to them and they, give you some of their energy, and you're getting some of their energy from them, and you're giving them your energy as well. And it's like this beautiful connection. It's like a dance that you have with that person. I'm sure you've experienced it, right?
Oh yeah, many times. And sometimes you have to build it. Sometimes it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes you have that period of breaking the ice where it sort of feels you feel a little bit vulnerable with somebody else and a little bit guarded and unsure, or they feel a little bit guarded and unsure. So there's things that you can do to sort of build a platform for it, active listening, really listening to somebody else reflectively, and let them feel that they're being heard, and sometimes mirroring back to them what you just heard them say so they know that you've gotten them, even if it's just in a friendship, or it doesn't have to be in a mental health setting or in a therapeutic setting, any kind of setting, really listening to somebody. The body language you're sending is very important. Eye contact around 60% of the time or so. Knowing that they've been heard, nodding so that you establish that you get them. And if you don't, here's something else about rapport and make someone comfortable with you. If you don't get what they're saying, being honest about that, saying, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Or I'm sorry, I'm not really sure I understood exactly what you said, or I had a question about that. That also establishes trust, because you're not just pretending to listen, you're actually listening. And if you don't get something, someone feels more comfortable about the fact that you asked for clarification. So it's about honesty as well, and the attempt to try to understand exactly where somebody's coming from. That's important as well. Your nonverbal communication, like you just described, is incredibly important. Your body language, your posture. People could tell if you're really listening, if you're actively listening, reflectively listening. And empathy is probably the most important component of that as well. Really having, because in our professions, probably in every profession, you can develop something very easily called compassion fatigue. You're listening to somebody all day, and there's a little part of you, and I I, I wonder why I'm disclosing this, but there's a part of you that might start to say, oh God, what do I care? You know what I mean? But that's not that. Of course you do care, but it's a burnout. It's a feeling of burnout. So if you're pretending to listen, if you're pretending to build rapport with somebody, that's going to exhaust you. Find something interesting in the person that you're with, or in the situation that you're with all the time, even if you're losing focus or you're losing concentration, because we're only human, right? So whether you're working or whether you're establishing friendships, if you find yourself waning or shutting down or pulling back, or rapport is not really there, find something interesting in the conversation, in the person, in what they're saying and how they're saying it. Let yourself be curious, let yourself be open. So it's not like you're pretending to build rapport, because that'll become exhausting after a while. If you pretend to listen, then that'll become tiring, and eventually, you'll develop compassion fatigue, because you're not really present. You're trying to be present, and that's different. So that, and I say also empathy. Just remember to have empathy, both for yourself, if you need to take some deep breaths, and for the person you're with. So, and if you're not really, I say again, honesty to build rapport. If you're not understanding where someone's coming from, saying, sorry, I don't know very much about that topic, or I'm not really in tune with what you're talking about, or I've never watched that show. You've been talking about it for 25 minutes, but I've not seen one episode, or I really don't know who that is. That drops your guard and makes you more vulnerable, and sort of puts the other person at ease, because you're not pretending to care. You're really trying to care. Like, tell me more about what you're talking about, because I'm not really sure who that is or what that is, or, and that's the risk of being not liked by saying that, because everyone wants to belong. So I think honesty is also extremely important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, I think it's important to be genuine and to really, be honest, like you mentioned. And also, I feel like if you watch the other person, one of the techniques that I learned in NLP, which is neuro-linguistics programming, is basically to watch their breath. If you watch their breath and you can really connect in that level, that's very deep level, of following their breath and breathing at the same level as they do, you sort of start to, vibrate in the same frequency as the other person. And the idea again is to connect in a very deep level. I feel like when I've done this, when I've experienced this, you can feel their feelings, you can feel their emotions, you can see where they're coming from, and in some ways it's easier to help that person at that moment. And sometimes you don't even have to do anything. Just as simple as connecting with that person will feel the love, will feel that, like I said, like the kid, when you're mimicking the kid, and the kid starts to, get happier and starts smiling more, and they sort of come back to life, and they start to try to do other things because they want to see how far you'll go. And that is kind of what happens when you connect with someone. You feel that way. And it almost, another exercise that I did in acting school was it's called the mirror exercise, where we basically stand in front of the other person, and then you start doing the same movements as the other person. And at some point, the one person leads, and then at another point, the other person leads. And, you switch back and forth for a little bit, for a few minutes. And then at one point you stop leading and the other person stops leading. And then you both are basically doing the same movements, because now you're connected. And when you're connected, you can feel, you can sense the other person, they can sense you, and you sort of become one person. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Becoming that third person, that third relationship you're building between the two of you. And it happens, with different people. Like if you have if your dad or your mom, or it could be a coworker or your best friend, you sort of build this connection with that person. And every time you see each other, you feed that, third person and become stronger. And all that is something that you're building over time, and it gets better with time. Now, again, like you mentioned, if you're not listening or you get fatigued or tired, that connection can also break because of that. If you notice that the person is lying or they're not, really paying attention, you feel the opposite. You feel like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't really care about me. Why am I even here? And then you start to separate each other and you start to go away. And that is the one of the issues that happens with, rapport is if you start breaking the rapport, then it's like a connection that gets cut off. And then eventually there's nothing there. And you could still live in the same house with someone for 20 years and not have rapport, no connection at all. And so that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Rapport also, once you've built it, I love the mirroring exercise you talked about in acting school, because I also myself had an acting training background for a very long time. And that was something that once you established rapport through that kind of mirroring or with anybody, what happens is that you actually become receptive to each other's feedback. You become your energy becomes, an ebb and flow that becomes natural. So you trust each other more, both on stage, like you were talking about, and in real life. You trust each other's ebb and flow a lot more. So and also in our work, for example, let's say it comes down to you have a close friend or you have a client or you have a coworker, and you need to say something a little bit challenging to them. I don't want to necessarily say confronting, but there comes a point in my work, for example, as a therapist, where I've built a rapport, and only after I've built a rapport do I challenge a client. Basically it's what we call calling BS. When we've known them for a long time, if they're backtracking on themselves and that they are and they know that they are, I can call them on this and challenge them and saying, something along the lines of, do you think you're telling yourself the truth right now? Or is there another way of looking at what you just said? In a bit more challenging way. Once you've built rapport, they trust that coming from you. They trust that as feedback and not as criticism, not as an attack. But when you haven't built rapport, just like on stage, one of the reasons that, acting teachers have us do that is because if I say something to you or do something like offbeat in the scene or something sudden, you may have a sudden moment where you resist or guard against what I just did that was maybe even a little bit outside the script, but if we've built that rapport, you ebb and flow with each other. It becomes this natural synergy and it just flows, and the same thing in clinical work. I could challenge people more and get them to go where they want to go more once I've built that rapport, because they trust where I'm coming from. And and it helps to build loyalty as well. One thing that it does is help to build loyalty. They will keep coming back, even if they're disappointed or you're disappointed, or even if you feel frustrated, or even if you feel not entirely fulfilled each time that you're with that person. You'll come back again because there's a certain bond that has been created. It's like past the honeymoon stage of a relationship. The first 6 months, it's all flowers and chocolate or whatever your thing is. And then after that, it's waking, like I think you said it last week, it's waking up in the morning and seeing yourself in your worst light. You know what I'm saying? So after somebody slept, and it's just getting used to somebody being there. So at that point, there's a rapport that's built. It's a loyalty, right? So as it's a question of building that first, and then you have much more freedom to go with each other's energy. You have more of a trust, even if it's not something you expected or not something you wanted to hear. Someone who shows you a project and says, "Hey, what do you think of my drawing?" If it's someone you don't know, you're probably going to go, "Oh, lovely," and you're going to find something you do like and talk about that. But if it's someone you really have a rapport with, you might say, "You know what? This really isn't your best work. This is good. But what was going on here in your like whatever in your background? Were you just are you trying to make this less less poignant than your other pictures, or is that done on purpose?" You're able to sort of really give feedback with that trust and loyalty, and that just opens you up because you could be yourself that way, and that's what rapport really also feeds into, is being able to be yourself, being authentic, being genuine, and not having to put on a show or an act for anybody. And that's why it's hard to meet people for the first time, whether it's in a client situation, clinical situation, or social situation, because there's no ebb and flow yet. We're still a little bit on guard until the guard starts to melt, and then we can truly be ourselves and be less guarded, So that's when rapport starts to build. So yeah.
But I
There's
tell
some good
you,
articles too.
I have to say, and it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, people that are hard to do rapport with. But I when I was before that, I wanted to say when I was younger, I remember when I was like 8 or 9, I remember just walking out, as a kid in my neighborhood and walking up to another kid and saying, "Hey, you want to play?" And the kid would be like, "Yeah, sure." And that was it. And then we started playing. We became friends, and we started to build rapport over that. And we started doing playing with little cards or marbles or whatever. And it was just very easy because I feel like as kids we don't have those resistances or those barriers to talk to other people. And I'm sure you've seen kids how they do it really easily. But I feel like part of that mistrust comes with life and things that happen to us, and we suffer. And so when we get older, like now that I'm over 40, I ask people, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" They're like, "Oh, why do you want to be friends?" And then they start thinking all these things like, "Oh, he probably wants to sleep with me," or he probably has another agenda. What is he trying to sell me? Blah 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 blah. And we start thinking of all the things that have happened to us. So it's not as easy to make friends nowadays when we're older. But it's I think it's part of what we're talking about is how do you get to that connection, and especially when it comes to people that are not like us, people that are different, that may have different points of views. They could be completely opposite in their views of politicians, or how they think about certain subjects. And I think that's where you really need the rapport more than any time before, because I feel like the again, going back to the Coke and the Sprite, you're both very different. I mean, Coke is very dark, and Sprite is very light and transparent. And so when you mix both of them, then you create this new light dark color that's different, right? And that's what we're trying to do. I think that when you can really change yourself in the sense that you can see where they're coming from. Like, why are they feeling the way they feel about this subject? Why are they, do they think about this? And you try to understand the other person, because the other person could be right, and sometimes we just get, we get stuck in our ways of thinking, and maybe we're the ones that are wrong and the other person is right, but we won't know that until we can see where they're coming from. And again, the other person could be the same. And so unless they can see where we're coming from and have that conversation and bind your views and do what they call fusion, where you can create a new flavor between both of you, then there won't be any change between you two. So I think that's kind of what the usefulness of rapport is. It's one of the most useful things that I use in my regular practice. And I've treated people from all kinds of races, and Mexicans, and white and Asians, and all kinds. And I think that everybody has something to teach. We all have our own experiences, our own lives, and the idea is most people are not interested in learning about us. They're interested about themselves, and they are only interested of what they have to say. So unless we become more flexible and we try to see where they're coming from, then nobody's ever going to create more rapport between each other.
Yeah, that's the idea of, I agree. That's the idea, is that getting into the world of somebody else, being curious about somebody else's world, and being able to listen to somebody else's experience is also building rapport. Because sometimes, you'll listen to somebody's issue or presenting issue, or you'll meet somebody who's vastly different from you, coming from a whole different world. And, it's people often think, for example, in my field, a lot of clients will think, well, if you're not a person of color, or if you're not a female, or if you're not, from this particular background or culture, you may not understand fully, my situation. Or if you're not specialized or certified in that particular area or with that particular population, you may not fully understand where I'm coming from. And there's something to be said about coming from the same background and or having a specialization in something, but building rapport, it's been shown, can actually override a lot of that. Because if you're open and curious about somebody else's world and experience, and you're not coming from your own previous filters, you're not coming from your own previous lenses and paradigms, you're actually listening to somebody else's lens and paradigm, and really getting into their world, you could you could either treat and or get to know almost anybody. Even in what's going on in the country right now, when everybody's so divided, people think I can't relate to a person who thinks that way or that or this way. If you are really curious about somebody else's world, you may not agree with it, and it's not a question of agreement or condoning or even accepting. It's a question of understanding and hearing what makes another person see through that lens. What does it look like through their lens? What does it look like through their world? What is important to them and how come it's important to them? You know, and if you really, really peel it away, it's all coming down to the same basics that we all share. Fear, sadness, frustration, basic human needs and desires and emotions. It all boils down to the same thing. Nobody's coming from a different planet because they have a different perspective or because they have a different background or because they have a different presenting issue than you. So, I mean, I see a lot of clients that are vastly different from me, that I would never find myself in the position to have that kind of presenting issue. But I can fully understand their world by listening to it. And it's a fascinating process to be that curious about somebody else. And here's the good thing. Here's the good news, is that when you do something like this for a living, or when you have a close friend or acquaintance, you only have to be curious about them for a short period of time. You don't have to do it all day long. You don't have to take it home with you. You know what I'm saying? You could just be curious about people throughout the day, especially if we're talking about clients. If it's a close friend of yours, you can be, you could develop that rapport and compartmentalize it to that particular time that you're with them. You don't have to necessarily fully absorb or even agree. I could be a non-religious person who has very religious friends. In fact, I actually do, and vice versa, because I get into what's important to them. And also we share things in common, that because whatever you don't see as being something you fully understand, I'll bet you there's other things that you do. Two people who are on both sides of the political fence these days can both enjoy a hike together because they both like hiking. They found common ground. There's always something you both like. You both love chocolate. There you go. You both love Star Wars. You both love whatever it is. And there's a way to build that rapport through commonality, even if people are very different. So, yeah.
But I do think though that every time you have an experience either with a client or a friend or anyone, and you go into their world, you do take some of that with you, and because you've already learned something new that you didn't know before. And, I feel like and I agree that you don't have to do it all day long, but at the same time, you do take that with you. And once you know something, it kind of stays with you. And I feel like that's what experience is all about. It's like you said, like you taste that chocolate and you already know the taste of chocolate. And I feel like every person has their own flavor, and because everyone's unique, everyone has their own life and they have their ways of thinking and doing things. And, if you get curious for a little bit and see what they're doing and how they do things, then maybe you can change your ways as well and see if you can, use some of their experiences to change yours and shape yours. And I feel like, that's where the beauty of life comes in, when there's a combination of things and experiences from other people, from your experiences. And I feel like, you can have rapport with not just people, but dogs and cats and any type of animal, living organism. I feel like we all have our own experiences and do things their certain ways, and rapport is a very it's a natural thing that we have. We have those mirror neurons in our face that can see other people and mirror what they're doing in their faces. And we could do the same with animals. We could do the same with many different things. And and I've done this exercise as part of my meditations, by the way. And whoever's interested, I have my YouTube channel, by the way. You can look up Robert Aceves on YouTube, and now you'll find me. But one of the meditations that I love doing is sitting and just imagining myself being an ant, for example. And I see the world through the eyes of an ant, and it's really weird. It's very different. But when you do it, and and you see ants in the world after that, I don't feel like killing them anymore. I can see what their world is like, and I may not understand it 100%, but I do feel like I have a little bit of a connection with ants now because I've seen the world many times through their eyes. Maybe I was an ant in a past life. I don't know. But my point is that, when you see things from other people's points of views, or, animals' points of views, then you can understand where they're coming from, that they have feelings, that they have, goals, they have things that they have to do for the day. They have things, ants have, a big agenda. They're very, very, they're workaholics. They work so much and they do so many things. But that's what I'm talking about. When you connect and you have that rapport with people, with things, you change. It changes you in some way. And it's a good feeling. It's not bad to change and to grow and to see other things. And the more you can see, I feel like the more points of view you can experience, the bigger of a person you become, because you can see other people's points of views. You can not just know yours but other people's, and then when you bring it back to yours, then yours is bigger, because now it's not only just your point of view but other points of views that can combine and create something more beautiful.
And I think some people are prevented from developing rapport because they're afraid of, if they drop their guard to get curious about others, they may be afraid of being judged by others, or sometimes having a strong sense of self-identity it's easier for people who do to be curious about other people, because sometimes one of the things that stops people from building rapport with other people or getting to know other people is like the opposite of what you're saying, sort of afraid of losing themselves inside of someone else. If you don't have a strong sense of who you are, you might fear that you'll be absorbed by someone else's energies, or that you'll be judged by somebody else. And so looking at what's preventing you from connecting with other people. Connecting, again, doesn't mean everyone's going to become your best friend. Just means connecting, building rapport. What's preventing you from doing that? Sometimes people are afraid themselves of being judged. I mean, I might be curious about you, but I might be curious about what your curiosity is about me. And if I feel that I might be judged, I might hold back. I might put up a guard. I might judge you before I'm judged by you. And that might, keep people from, what is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're afraid of seeing? Sometimes getting to know other people, and the lens of other people is scary, because, we don't want to look at something in ourselves. We don't want to look at something in ourselves that is frightening to us. So sometimes if we're judging other people, we're really judging ourselves, and we just have to look out for that, because that could be a block as well, because some people have a hard time, really truly dropping their own guard. And just examine yourself. What is it that you're afraid of? What is it you're afraid of being judged by? What is blocking you from building rapport with other people and from being genuine with other people? Because when we say be yourself, well, some people have a hard time with that. Some people have a hard time trusting that with other people, trusting other people with that. So check in with yourself. What are you thinking about what other people are thinking of you? Because that'll have a lot to do with whether or not you're able to at least temporarily drop your guard and be empathetic about the way other people are. I know some people are, have that fear that if they get too close to people too different from them, that somehow they're not holding on to their own identity strongly enough, and that's not true at all. That's what I meant before. Is that you can come home at the end of the day. Who you are is who you are. You're not going to get sucked up by somebody else because they're very different from you, is what I'm saying. So that's not the fear that one should give into in terms of building rapport with somebody who's very different from you. So that's
I had this question years ago when I was part of doing my training, and I went to a seminar with Richard Bandler, who was one of the creators of NLP, and he also was one of the people who trained Tony Robbins years ago. And he told me, get out of your head. That's the answer. I feel like, we have to get out of our heads in order to build rapport with other people and stop thinking, too much about it, and really have to, I guess I mentioned earlier, like see other points of views. Like if you really see, what the other person is thinking or feeling or experiencing, it changes you. And in order to do that, you have to get out of your head. You cannot, think, oh my gosh, what if they judge me or this or that? And and I used to do that myself. So the idea though is to get out of your head, to go out there, externalize your feelings and just put them out there and try to see what the other person is doing without focusing so much on yourself. But, again, rapport is about the other person at first, and then, you start seeing what they're doing, just like the mirror exercise. You start moving the same way they move. You start even the match of your voice has to match what they're saying, just to make sure that you connect with that person. Because what if the other person is sad and they're having a really bad day, and then you come in with this really strong, hey, how you doing, like, get up there, they might feel a little like, oh yeah, like all the stuff you mentioned, of course. So you gotta approach in the same vibration as the other person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with the sea lion. If the guy would have approached him like running and, hey, how you doing, and start petting it might have gotten scared and maybe would have run away. Like that's what most sea lions do. So that's the thing. You gotta approach the person. You gotta see what's going on first, and get out of your head, and look at the environment, look at the person, look at the emotions, look at the sound of their voice, look at what they're telling you with their bodies. Listen to the other person, pay attention, be out there, and then eventually you'll be able to connect with anybody. There's literally no one you cannot build rapport with if you pay attention and if you're flexible enough. So, and I think that would be, I don't know if you want to say any last words before we end.
Sure, I agree with that. Match somebody where they are. Well, let me see. Last words, building rapport. Building rapport, like I said, 90% of what I do has been proven to be as rapport, building rapport and having a bond and connection with the person that you're with is 90% of the output. 90% of the outcome is related to the rapport that you build with somebody else. I think that's true of most of life. The 90% of your success with somebody else has to do with the rapport that you're building. Also with the relationship that you have to almost anything that you do. Of course you want to have results and when you're doing whatever you're doing, but 90% of who you're being, in any connection that you have in life with people and any task that you take on, 90% of it is what you're saying about it. The rapport you're building with the situation itself, because you could build rapport not just with people, but with situations. You got to clean your whole house. What's your relationship to that? What's your rapport with your house?
Exactly. I agree.
You got to take a 3-hour drive. What's your rapport with that drive? You know what I'm saying? Find something you enjoy about it. Check in with yourself. 90% is, it boils down to 90% is an attitude, and that's true. 90% is what you choose to how you choose to connect to what's around you, not just who's around you. And that's going to show up so differently in your, you can create your day that way. You could wake up, I think, like you said, in that sort of like low energy or whatever, and you could literally create your day to 90% of an extent. So that's something also to keep in mind. It's not just about getting along well with people and bonding. It's also about how your day goes from one day to the next. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, thank you so much, Neil, for your time. Remember, we are here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Thanks to everyone for listening again and for keeping up with us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to all the people who donate to this podcast. We really appreciate it. It's not easy, but we're still doing it, and we'll continue to do it every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Please send us your questions, comments, anything. We would love to hear from you. So thank you, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Bye, Neil.
See you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by MindFit. Please help us to share this podcast with your friends and family to grow this community. And if you'd like to donate to this podcast, or if you'd like to share your comments, questions, or concerns, send them to mindfitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call us directly at 714-328-4661.